Yo, yo, yo. Hey, I'm Mark Buckner with the Mark Buckner Group and the Ben Lawless team, and we are recording at the Content Club. I'm here with Colby Green, my favorite real estate attorney. Uh, Colby, we've
Yes, sir.
done this once before. We're back
Okay.
with the second set of topics. Uh, I think people like this kind of educational topic of real estate law, and so I appreciate you coming in. Uh, First off, I wanted to talk a little bit about because I get this question about a lot. Uh, what is your primary role? I know what it is, but viewers don't know what it always is. Why in Illinois do I want to use a real estate attorney
Fuck, that's a good question.
when I'm buying a home, when I'm buying a residential home? And
Yeah.
and as you ponder that
Uh-huh.
question and think about that
hmm
question, uh, I think it's good to share that you charge $600 a closing.
hmm
Why is it that you're charging 600 instead of charging me $350 an hour for a real estate closing? Because when before I got into real estate into the industry, I was like, oh, I need a real estate attorney. It's like, oh my God, it's going to cost me
hmm
like how many hours are they going to work? And anytime I talk to them, are they like hit their little their stop clock to time my call? Like I think that's sometimes that's people's fears
hmm
about, it's what we've seen on TV. So tell us a little bit about what your role is in a real estate transaction in Illinois and how you come about your fee. Like tell us a little insight into that.
Yeah. So the role of an attorney in a real estate transaction is basically a couple of different things. First of all, after you've done all the heavy lifting of finding the place that they want to buy and negotiating a purchase price and all of that, there's still negotiation over sort of the finer points of the contract.
Yep.
And that's not something, I mean, you know, you're a bright guy, don't get me wrong, but that's not something that's in your wheelhouse,
No,
in your skill set as a
no,
realtor,
no.
nor
I
should it be.
I lean on you for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
Right. So sort of negotiating the finer points of the contract, um, reviewing the title to the property to make sure that the buyer is actually getting ownership of this condo or single family home or whatever it is they're buying. Um, um,
so tell me about that,
yeah.
like that part, like a title. What am I as a homeowner? Should I be concerned about the title that you have to research? Like,
Well, basically, the way the concept of title is it's kind of like a chain of title. So if you one of the things that's out there is the blockchain, which has to do with cryptocurrency and sort of the backbone for how that works. But it's basically the same idea, which is there was an original owner of this property, and then that original owner deeded it to this person, who deeded it to this person, who deed to that person, deed to that person, and so you've got this chain with a bunch of links in it. And basically, what you're looking at in terms of title is making sure that this link, which is going to be your buyer buying from the current owner of the property, is solid, and making sure the past couple of links before that is solid.
so give me an example. What when have you seen it where there is not a clear link, and how often does that happen?
Um, so sometimes where you see a not clear link is if there was, like, say, a married couple owning a property and one of them dies, and now the and then the other one goes to sell, and so now maybe the deed prior to this was giving the property to John and Jane Smith, and then John dies, and then we have a deed from Jane Smith to somebody, and it's like, okay, well, where the heck did John go? um, so you want to sort of inquire about that, make sure that that's buttoned up. Now if John had died and Jane, you know because of the way the ownership was, Jane is now the sole owner of the property, that's all fine. But you want to ask the questions.
Where does one go to about researching this? Where do you find this data? Because I'm fascinated. I don't have to look for it. I'm grateful I don't have to look for it. But where do you go?
Well, what I end up doing is making the seller's attorney prove it to me.
But sometimes you're the seller's attorney.
But sometimes I'm the seller's attorney. So when I'm the seller's attorney, I'm the one going to find out what the story is. So I will go to um, the it's the county clerk's office now. It used to be the county recorder's office. Is the place in downtown Chicago where all of the recorded deeds are kept and all that information is archived, going back to the Chicago fire.
So are these like on, I want to call it floppy disk. It's not floppy disk. Is it like microfilm?
It's
So like back on the day, they were putting it on microfilm.
yeah.
weren't
I don't
they?
know whether I don't really know the difference between
Remember, like,
microfilm or microfiche, but
Yeah.
it's one or the two of those, and
So you're like going to the library,
pretty much essentially, yeah.
and Cook County has all these records. And is it on a floppy disk or what's it on?
It's on. So if you want to get, well, they've started imaging it, so it's a lot of it's on the hard drive. It's on a computer drive. You can actually search from the privacy of your own home, going back to, I think it's sometime like 1980, 1990, something like that. But if you want anything older than that, you've got to go to the basement of the office, and they've got these big, huge, musty ledger books, like like in I don't know, Hogwarts or something like that. Um,
For real, like
yeah, yeah, and
paper.
yeah, paper. So the paper is a record of what all the transactions are. It'll have like the recording number for the document, the date it was recorded, the who it's from, who it's to. Then if you want the actual document, you've got to go back to the microfilm, microfiche. I don't know exactly what the difference is between those two. One of
And
them's on a spool and one of them's on a little card, and I don't know which is which.
do you have to like? Can anyone go there?
Yeah, absolutely. This is all public records. Yeah,
I've never been.
you should go.
It's a
You
field
should go.
trip.
Field trip. All right, very good.
So big part of the role is making sure that the property has a clear line of trading hands in sync and no hiccups.
Exactly.
And so that's a big part of it. Part of it's renegotiating of the contract.
Mm-hmm.
Now, traditionally, I have probably for the last 5 years have used a multi-board 7.0 contract.
Yeah.
What is that contract? Who wrote that contract?
That is written by the, I know all of that contract backwards and forwards except who wrote it. It's some sort of conglomeration of realtors boards in the Chicago area.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. And it's the 7.0 is the version of the contract.
Yeah.
So it's like we were dealing with the 6.1 or 6.2 a few years ago. Now they're on 7.0.
I think it's probably the most thought out contract out there
Yeah.
for like a buyer and a seller and all the what ifs
Mm-hmm.
that can come up in a deal.
It's 13 pages long, so they've got a lot of this stuff covered.
In relation to what you probably have better knowledge of this, I remember like 10 years ago, we were using like the 4-page
Mm-hmm.
residential contract, which I thought was pretty much horseshit.
And a lot of people still use that. It's got a couple of things I like about it, but by and large, I prefer the other one. Yeah.
It just kind of covers, it feels like it's balancing the books for both the buyer and the seller a little
Mhm.
bit more, and then kind of adds in all these possible turns that some deals may have, other deals may not, but for the most part, it covers all the bases.
Right. It's a pretty solid contract.
What parts of that contract do you mostly tweak
Um,
or push back on, or
So it depends on the deal. In some deals, I will tweak more than others. The one area that's usually left up to attorney negotiation is the real estate tax prorations, which we've covered in a prior podcast.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to get into that here. We might tweak issues like when possession will be turned over. Classically, you get possession at the closing. The closing is the appointment where the buyer signs all their documents, the seller signs all their documents, the money changes hands, the keys change hands, and that's it. Sometimes there will be instances where the seller rather, maybe needs to keep possession of the property a little bit longer because their new home isn't ready, or they've got to stagger things a little bit, and we can negotiate that during the attorney review process. And then at the closing, we make sure that's all documented and buttoned up so that everybody is protected. Expectations are set so that we know, when they're moving out, how much they're paying, what sort of security deposit they're leaving for things, that sort of thing. That's a big one that's a subject of negotiation. Those are really the two biggies. And then it's, oftentimes it's just a matter of sort of what comes up, what's unusual to the transaction.
So you're talking about post-possession close, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah.
we're going to close. So let's use the example. Your seller wants to close on a certain date, but they really want that money to go towards their new home that they're buying.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll close in March with a rent back for a month
Right.
from that new buyer.
Right.
So
Exactly.
the buyer doesn't take possession till April 1
Mhm.
because the seller's going to stay there. How do we deal with that lease? Is there a lease? What is the agreement?
Well, first off, we don't want it to be a lease because if it's a lease, that gets us into landlord-tenant law, which is its own particular nightmare in Chicago. I mean, I don't want to say nightmare, but its own particular difficulty in Chicago.
Well, the landlord, the rental laws or regulations
Landlord-tenant Act, yeah.
is really a little more lopsided, written for more of the tenant than the landlord.
It is very tenant favorable, as you well know. So what we do is we treat that as just simply a delayed transfer of possession. So we'll have a couple of things that will typically be a part of that. Number one, there'll typically be some sort of payment from the seller to the buyer for that. Now, not always. Sometimes they do it. That's like a sweetener that the buyer puts into the deal.
Yeah, in
So
today's
sometimes they'll do it
market.
for free.
Yep.
But oftentimes there'll be some form of payment going from the seller to the buyer for that possession because after all, the seller is now staying in a place they don't own anymore. There will also be typically some form of a security deposit or an earnest money deposit because now you've got a seller that's staying and they've got, all of the buyer's money or most of the buyer's money. So what incentive do they have to move? Well, if you've got, another $10,000 sitting in an escrow account somewhere that they don't get until they move out, that's a pretty good incentive. I mean, 10,000, when you're talking about buying and selling property in Chicago, 10,000 isn't a ton of money, but it's not money that people want to leave on the table.
No one's going to walk away from 10G.
Exactly.
At
No.
least I'm not.
No, not in our price range. Yeah.
Awesome. So we're talking about title. We're talking about taxes,
Mhm.
adjusting the taxes, dealing with rent backs.
Yeah.
So quite a few things that come up for
Yeah.
you.
Exactly.
I'm thinking about your letter.
Yeah.
One is always warranties. One is taxes.
Mhm.
One is, I think another one that's important that you
Okay.
talk about
Yeah.
is the extension of the disclosures. And I just called you about this issue
Yeah.
that I'm working
Oh,
with
you're
a
right.
different attorney on.
You're right. So one of the things that we do, one of the things that's part of the legal landscape here in Illinois and a lot of other states, but we work on it in Illinois, is disclosures. So whenever you're selling a residential property, the seller has to disclose to the buyer. There's this list of 23 or 24 things. Like the seller, and it's a yes or no question to each of these. The seller either is or is not aware of material defects in the walls, floors, ceilings. The seller is or is not aware of material defects in the basement. Same thing for defects in the plumbing, in the electrical, in the roof, in the, this, that. There's like 23, 24 things on there.
And what's the funniest question out of all of them? I don't know if it's funny.
I
It's
don't
a
know if
serious
it's funny.
question.
Are you talking? You're talking about the meth lab?
Yes.
Yeah. It's question I think 24. This is a recent addition to the law. Has this property been used for the production or distribution of methamphetamines? Is it just meth or is it other? I think it's just meth.
No, I
isn't
think
it?
it's just
Yeah, which is crazy.
Yeah.
But
Well,
so you got to hopefully check note of that.
like I tell everybody, there's
Yeah.
rules and regulations
Mhm.
for a reason because stuff happened
Right.
beforehand. Some really bad stuff for that question to end up in that.
Well,
category.
and if you're checking yes to that, you better call Saul. Don't call me. I don't have anything to do with that.
Yes,
Yeah.
very good.
Thank you.
Very good. There is your reference, Bridget. Bam! That was a mic drop
Nailed
from
it.
Colby.
Thank you.
That
Thank you
was
for the
a
setup.
mic drop. Holy shit! Pulls it out of his ass. Oh my god. Oh,
God.
that is funny. Well done, Kobe. So the reason why we're talking about
Yeah.
disclosures, besides Sal and Mr. Green,
Mhm.
Walter Green, that
Yeah.
is that, and we just had this. I just had this problem. So the disclosure said that there was no leaks, no roof problems. One of the thing is about the roof and leaking and seepage. Same thing with
Yeah.
the basement.
Mhm.
We said no. We've had some crazy rainstorms with the heat and humidity in Chicago, so of course the roof leaked on me. We shared that the roof leaked, and we went and got a proposal. I got my favorite roofer out there. We did a video. We did pre and post photos and shared about the roof leak because in their attorney review, they said that these disclosures, they were, let's just use general dates, we'll go back to March, completed them on March 1, went under contract March 16th, and leaks on April 1st. So, like, what we're talking about is that the disclosure should run not just from the point they completed them, but through the
Right.
closing.
Right. You've got to and that's one of the things I insist on the buyer side is you've got to update this stuff because your disclosure is a question and answer about a point in time, and that point in time is before the contract is signed. So what I want to know and what I want my buyers to know is, okay, fine, seller, you knew this was your knowledge as of March 1st, but we got a month to go between now and closing, and you're going to be still living in this house during that time. So if you find out about anything between now and then, you got to let us know, and then we got to go back to the table and make sure you're dealing with it appropriately.
And that was kind of the interesting part that we had talked about, and that was the buyer of that house. I was representing the seller. Shared, we were fully transparent that there was a leak, and
Yeah,
I mean,
as you should be.
Yeah, exactly. That's where I was going. Like, I
Yeah.
think you need to do that no matter what. It's just
Exactly.
ethical, professional, courtesy. But then they started really needling us on, what kind of leak? How long's the leak been there? What's the roofer say? We want the whole roof looked at. We want this done. We have the right to refuse this at this point. And so it started to get bound to a little bit of a rabbit hole. And that's when I had called you to kind of like, where's a stop in any part?
Yeah.
I can tell you in the last 12 years, has that ever happened to me? No. But I think what you're trying to say is kind of in layman's terms, my father-in-law's terms was, cover your ass out there. And you're
much,
kind
yeah.
of in place to make sure the buyer and the seller is covered for lots of what ifs,
Right.
which I'm a fond believer. When I bought my property in Idaho didn't use attorneys, and the title company actually did more of the title search, but there's a lot of documents, new legal contract. I'd rather a seasoned professional. So even though it wasn't a legal town, I just gave you my contract and gave you my HOA docs and be like, okay,
Went to town.
let's do what we do in Illinois and Idaho.
Let's giddy up, right?
So then tell me, and maybe we're kind of answering this, is maybe we have, but like, there's FSBO, right? For sale by owner.
Right.
And I always think that the research shows that if you sell a home without a broker, the research shows that you're leaving more. You may be feeling like you're saving by not paying a commission, but still the research shows that I think they're leaving about I'll have to look up the data, but you're leaving a substantial amount of money on the table in your negotiations, but not just your time, which costs you money too. So the other question I have is, some people say you don't need a real estate agent to sell a home. You just need a real estate attorney.
Okay.
How many deals have you done where you closed and there wasn't a listing agent on the deal? And how did it go?
I've done a few. Mostly when I'm doing that, it's a family transaction. So like kid buying from their parents or something like
Oh,
that. Yeah.
and what have they done? That's
They've,
interesting.
so a couple of times I've had people just sort of agree on a price and they come to me and say, hey, can you do this deal? And I say, yeah, I'll put it together and give everybody all the paperwork to sign and we get it done.
So value's never discussed or concerned
Value's
about
never
the value.
discussed, and and that's sort of the situation where, like, squeezing the last dollar out of this is not important to these people because they're selling to their
Yeah,
kids or something like
yeah,
that. Um,
absolutely. Hopefully
so,
that's the case.
yeah, I mean, hopefully, exactly. Um, and I've done a couple other transactions like that where it was like, friends who have known each other forever selling the property to each other or something like that. Um, I have not, trying to think. I can't. I'm not sure I can think of a transaction I've done where there was not where it was like, truly adverse parties
Yeah,
and not a listing agent.
yeah, interesting.
Um,
Have you done many where there wasn't a cooperative broker on the deal?
I've definitely done some where there wasn't a cooperative broker, where there wasn't a buyer's agent,
Yep.
right?
How
And
did they go?
um, I mean, I wound up doing a lot more of the work.
Why?
Because agents add value to the process, and agents do some lifting.
So you were representing the buyer.
I was representing the buyer, and it was a bit more work for me. I wound up charging a bit more money. Um, I don't know what sort of deal my clients got on the property because, evaluating real estate prices is not what I bring to the table. So I don't know. I just took the contract and said, okay, you want to pay, I don't know, $250,000 for this condo? Fine, offer 250.
Oh, so they even came to you to write up the contract.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. I
interesting.
mean,
I'm thinking they're coming to you with the contract they already negotiated.
no, it was more of a writing up the contract because at that point they would have agreed on a price with the seller and said, okay, we want to buy this property for this much money. So how do we do it?
Got it.
Yeah. And at that point, I'm not, like I said, value is not where I come into the process. I mean, determining value of real estate is not where I come into the process. I can look at numbers and give you a guess, but your guess is going to be, 10 or 50 times better than my guess. So,
Sure, sure.
I don't do that. So I wrote up a contract, pushed it through, made a sale.
What areas of that negotiation also became difficult? Where did you have to lift heavier?
Um, Really a lot more of the sort of educating buyers on the steps they need to take to be comfortable with the property. Like helping them more with the home inspection, which is one of the things you do a lot of, is going through the home, with not only a realtor's eye to it, but also with a property owner's eye, and with the home inspector saying, okay, these are, you know, here is your stuff you've got to look at. Here's what's wrong with the property. Here's things you've got to look at in terms of maintenance expenses, things like that. So I had to sort of step out of my comfort level and do that kind of work with them as well. Um, a lot more of the legwork that the realtors end up doing is something I took on.
How much money do you think they saved?
Well,
Did they get the cooperative broker commission? Do you know that?
I don't know that. I'm told that in the price negotiation they talked with the seller about like reducing the price a little bit because they didn't have a broker. So, they may have gotten some of that, but again, you know, I don't know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And part of you can, I'm sure you can see where I'm going with
Yeah.
this. Because what's coming up next month?
What's coming up next month, Mark?
The NAR National Settlement Date,
Yeah.
August 17th,
Okay.
supposedly going to change our industry,
Mm-hmm.
which I think there's certain things, I'm getting this question asked all the time.
Yeah.
Are you not getting it?
I'm not getting it because I get into the process after
Sure.
the brokers are involved.
So National Association of Realtors, big settlement. I don't
Mhm.
even know how much is the settlement. Three big things that I'm experiencing in changes in preparation for that.
Mhm.
One is I am now having a conversation with friends, family, clients, sellers, buyers about what's going on.
Mhm.
And that is the changes that are coming. So the first change that I'm experiencing is that we're actually having these conversations a lot more, which I like personally.
Yeah.
Uh, I and I think as well it's put at least I can only talk about myself and probably some of the people on the team at the Ben Lawless team is that we're having more conversations about it, and I'm finding it healthier for my business
Mhm.
and for my clients that we're just talking about this stuff.
Mhm.
I think everyone as a whole has tiptoed around it. You know, the big thing was that brokers' commissions are negotiable.
Mhm.
Well, I always thought,
They've always been
yeah,
negotiable, right?
thank you. Right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like that McDonald's hot coffee settlement
Yeah.
lawsuit, right? Like
Yeah.
coffee's hot.
Yeah.
Unless you hear some ice, it's gonna be hot.
Mhm.
That's the assumption. I learned that at a very early age. Uh,
Mhm.
that's so we're talking about it. The other big change is you're going to have a signed agreement with a buyer's agent to go see a home. Now, how's the industry going to monitor that? I don't know. Going to show your buyer's agreement, get in the door. I don't see listing
Mhm.
agents doing that, uh, but that's going to be happening.
Mhm.
Another big change is that right now it's posted on the MLS. If you are a consumer and have a search set up on the MLS, you can see what the cooperative broker is being paid.
Mhm.
That's going to go away.
Right.
And that's not going to be listed on the MLS anywhere. We're
Mhm.
going to have to get that information from the listing agent. And
Mhm.
so the industry, I think, is trying to come up with ways. I know Compass is like, how do we relay this information? Like,
Yeah.
right now we are in probably the biggest low inventory, high demand for
Mhm.
products. So if you have a listing, I've been fortunate enough to have a lot of listings. Like there's times for the most part, I'm just pushing all showings to an open house and managing things by email a lot because,
Yeah.
and I guess I could have an email, add that to some of my information email templates when I have a listing, but
Mhm.
I just see like people blowing me up on that all the time.
Yeah.
Uh, so those are probably the big three changes we're experiencing now. Uh, from what I'm seeing is that we're still seeing, and a lot of my clients are still willing to and still planning to pay a
Mm.
cooperative broker's commission. I'm
Yeah.
sure there's going to be some uh, people out there who are the cowboys and cowgirls that are
Mhm.
going to buck the system like, the first time smartphones came out. You and I have been around long enough
Mhm.
to uh, see when the Blackberries came out, the
Oh,
Palm
yeah.
Pilots, the
Yeah.
iPhones. Like, I wasn't the first one to buy one of these.
Mhm.
I doubt you were.
No.
But we all have them now.
Yeah.
And there was some new transition as the kinks were worked out and prices got adjusted and everyone started buying them, right? We saw the value.
Mhm.
Uh, I suspect it's going to cost everybody a little bit of money. But I think where I was coming with this
Yep.
is you were talking about the value add that a broker, we're talking about the value add that a broker has, the
Right.
value add that an attorney
Yeah.
has in this state,
Yeah.
right? And when you don't, it's no matter what going to cost that consumer more money.
Yeah.
If someone's not paying a cooperative broker,
Mhm.
we do add value. Uh, and if you
Absolutely.
have more questions about that, I'm happy to have a conversation with you. Uh, but I think people don't realize that when you're spending your life savings up until that point,
Mhm.
whether it's 50,000, 200,000, and you're going to buy a $200,000 home or a $2 million
Yeah.
home, like there's a lot at stake. It gets very emotional, and probably one of the biggest roles that you pay a broker for is to hold your hand through the process,
Mhm.
manage this process, help you make an educated decision, a mindful decision from the facts
Mhm.
and the emotion that you're experiencing in this transaction.
Absolutely.
Uh, and I suspect that was part of the cap that you had to put on holding their hand. And I think
Mhm.
where you and I work well together is you understand, and this may seem a little arrogant, this is a potluck meal that I'm having. And
Mhm.
like I've worked X amount of hours with this client by the point I introduce you to them,
Yeah.
right? Uh, and you understand that you're invited to this dinner,
Mhm.
and you provide a valued service to it, but you still respect that I'm kind of the eyes and ears for this deal. I
Mhm.
was out in the field. I saw the home that they're going
Yeah.
under contract. I negotiated it. I always make sure. I don't know if every broker does this, but I always, as you know, send you my negotiation
Yeah.
email thread so you have some background story of how we got to where we got. So if we're representing the seller and the buyer wants to start renegotiating, or that attorney to the deal starts trying to renegotiate with us, it's like, no, there's
Yeah.
there's a hard line for me with
We've
our clients.
we've done this before. Exactly. Yeah. I can't tell you how
Uh,
invaluable that is. That's fantastic.
so
Yeah.
one last question I have for you
Yes,
as
sir.
I'm kind of watching time is, what do you think how's AI going to have an impact on the legal component of this industry?
Oh.
I see the benefits for me
Mhm.
right now. Like I right now don't have to spend hours writing up a listing narrative. I can take my details, throw it into AI. AI can write it better than I
Mhm.
can. Uh, and I love that aspect of the industry for me. I see the benefit for my kids
Yep.
in college, but
Mhm.
what do you see? How's this going to impact you as an attorney?
Eventually the computers take over, right?
They do, right?
Yeah.
But okay, I can put something. I can send my facts.
Yeah.
Take my fact data,
Mhm.
right? Let's use the
Yeah.
disclosure.
Yeah.
Uh, throw it into AI
Mhm.
and say put this into a legal framework for
Mhm.
me. But I still am. How do I trust that they're not giving advice.
No.
They can, I can give data and ask them to write it up as a legal contract,
Yeah.
but I don't trust that they can foresee all the possible unknowns.
The thing about the current AI models is that they generate words that sort of grammatically go together, but there's not necessarily a mind behind it.
They're not abstract
It's
thinkers.
they're not thinkers. They're not. It's not based on the meaning of the words. And I'm going to garble this horribly, but as you know, one of my sons is a computer
Yeah.
genius, and he's told me more about
And
this
he
than
is a computer genius.
he's told me more about this than I can possibly understand. But the basic idea of how these work is it's this large language model training where the computer learns by assessing a huge volume of written work and seeing words in proximity to other words and saying, okay, these words go together. Or like if you have these three words, the fourth word is probably, dog or whatever, or contract or disclosure or whatever the fourth word is. So they put things together that seem like they hold together, um, and sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. So you're always going to need a human mind. Well, I shouldn't say always because predicting far enough in the future is always a
Yeah,
dangerous game. But
yeah.
for the foreseeable future, you're going to need a human mind behind that checking it. Now, AI can do some lifting for you, but like if you throw your data into something and say, okay, come up with a listing for me, you're gonna proof the listing.
Oh, we're definitely proofing
Yeah,
the listing. And
yeah,
as you know, like
hmm
I'm great at writing up facts and data, but
yeah,
I'm not a creative writer.
hmm.
I'm frank to a fault. Most people know that about me. They like that about me.
Absolutely.
Uh, but it's not my forte of writing some beautiful, flowy
Hmm.
description about a property. And AI is just kind of
Right.
helped streamline that, save me hours because I usually would belabor that, and it's not. We all have our strengths,
Yeah.
and so if I can lean into tech for my strength, well, that's all part of the practice.
Oh, absolutely.
That's interesting. But I
Yeah.
agree with you. I don't until at some point they can think for us. I don't see there's no substitute for you.
And when they can do that, we've got to figure out what our purpose is, because otherwise, I don't know what
How
we
are
do
we gonna?
here.
I hope at that point in time, either we're completely out of the game or
Yeah.
or we're said and gone. So hopefully that's a long time in the future.
I'm thinking so.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
I
but
appreciate
thank you.
it.
All right,
Give me a little fist bump.
got it.